We back. Mitchell Reports Unleashed podcast. And everyone, I like to tell y'all, I appreciate for the 8.5 years of doing this, your support, the views, the listens, everything. Like, share, subscribe. Today, we have conversations, powerful ones. And I not only have an author, but I also have a lady here that's about to speak life into all of us, overcoming adversity and all that other good stuff. Michelle Dowd, how's it going?
So lovely to spend time with you, Rory. For real.
Yeah. You know, author. Let's get to that first and foremost because it's a rewarding thing when you're an author and you can share your story, speak life into a lot of men and women, even the younger generation that's growing up. The author of Forager, Field Notes of Surviving a Family Cult, a memoir by Michelle Dowd yourself. Let's speak to that book, the importance of that book, the golden ticket that has led you into the world that you're into right now. What can folks get into when it comes down to that book?
Well, the thing that surprised me about the book is I was not planning on writing it. And as many of the most beautiful things that come into our lives, it was an invitation. And when we get scary invitations, it was a story I didn't talk about. I ran away from it my whole adult life. People knew me very well, and I never spoke of where I came from. I had a lot of shame around it. And so as a professor, I used to teach students all the time. And in fact, I've taught in prisons as part of my profession quite a lot. And I have asked these incarcerated humans to lean into their story, and they don't need to tell me the story of their crime, but lean into the story they want to tell. Because I was teaching for college credits, creative nonfiction, and also teaching poetry and teaching to men and in women in different prisons. And I always ask them to lean into what they were most scared of. And it's way easier to tell someone that than to do it yourself. And so I was telling my students to do something over winter break that they were pretty sure they would fail at. And they would get extra points at the beginning of January if they could bring in rejection and they could share their rejection. Because I think it helps us destigmatize all that. And so I have a policy of every time I offer a new assignment, I have to do that assignment because I want to experience what my students are experiencing. And so I submitted an essay to Modern Love at the New York Times over winter break. And this was in 2020. And I just wrote about something I was super uncomfortable with. And I was had a lot of shame around, and I referenced where I came from. And that particular essay did very, very well for the New York Times. It got a lot of attention, and I started getting a lot of calls from book agents. And I bring all this up to say I did not have a book written at that point. I had just barely begun to initiate talking about my story. And I honestly think that the inmates were one of the reasons I did that. And so when I got this invitation, my first instinct was nope, I don't have a book. I don't have a book in me. I want to walk away from this. And then I remembered what I had said so many times is when you feel that fear, you got to lean into it and figure out what's there. So I accepted the opportunity, and in advance, we sold a proposal pretty quickly. And the process of writing this book made me realize that my story, while we all have unique stories, is not that unusual to the extent that all of us, maybe not all of us, yeah, all of us come from somewhere that has both damaged us and also given us tools. And when I think about what I felt was the damage, but then the process of writing the book helped me recognize that I had learned something from that experience, and that those tools were something that other people who are not raised in cults can also use, because we all come from some form of damage, and some of us more than others, but we all experience it, and we can either let it keep us down our whole lives, or we can figure out our best way of managing and moving forward. And so what I hope this book has done, and I've certainly heard from a lot of people, is help them recognize that they do have tools. They're not all out there. They're already in here. And some of them are similar to the ones I have. Some of them are different. But you, Rory, and each of our audience members, they have something inside of them that they learned from their own damage and their own upbringing. And it's not only the beautiful things that give us these gifts. It is often the really most troubling ones.
Yeah. And well said, because, we all have to, you say it, we all go through something in life. We all have gone through something. And it's hard when some folks are I haven't been through anything. Really? Are you lying? Because it's okay to sit into that. and say you've been through something. Could be a loss of a job. That's a traumatic experience for some people. It could be loss of a pet, could be loss of a loved one, a whole bunch of different things. But then it speaks to that overcoming adversity part. You speak about that cult, and where I got in conversation when bringing you here on the podcast was the Joe Rogan Experience, that podcast that you were on. Well done, brilliantly done. And then the Megyn Kelly Show, where she brought you on as well. And I encourage a lot of folks. Some people are like, well, wait, you're plugging those other podcasts. Yes, because I'm paying homage to say to folks, get into that Joe Rogan deep dive. It was what, almost 3 hour conversation. A lot there, right? We could sit here for 3 hours, but we have a life. We got things going on. But it's just to say to folks is that when you hear a lot of the in-depth points of her story growing up and how she's now transitioned this into her leadership role of helping people, it can be done. You know what I mean? Let's get into that overcoming adversity part, right? When we speak to the cult and where you're now. What's one of the biggest learning lessons you learned?
So I think I would rephrase that as dancing with adversity, because I do not only think of adversity as something that's behind me. I think it's something that is in my life right now, and it's also coming in my future and in all of our futures. And so the number one thing I've learned is that the tools that I have developed to handle and manage and dance with diversity and adversity, like, because they're so many times the same thing. Like, what we're scared of is change. And so the diversity of the way the world is moving, or the diversity of our health or our friendship groups, or any of the things that come to us that are not part of the uniform systems that we've been trained in, like, that can turn into adversity. And it's like the dance with that keeps us really supple. And when, like, just even the dance of being public after writing a book, and that was something that I was very hesitant to do. And when Joe's people called me and they asked me to come on, like, that is not something that I was actively pursuing. So one of the things in life is to dance with that. And like the good things that come to you are also challenging. They really are. And they're like, everything challenges your sense of what you consider stasis, right? Like, we have a calm, we have like a comfort zone, and the things that are bad that happen to us and the things that are surprisingly good that come to us challenge that stasis. And I try now to always say, if I can keep myself supple, whether that's through meditation, through running, but do something so that I can show up and be present for what shows up in my life.
Mm-hmm. When you're on this journey now, right, and you speak to the high prolific things that we get access to, I know the same, people, you have people of influence, things like that, and you hear what they have to go through. Because they got to show up. Sometimes they're ducking and dodging. They're in and out of, privatized vehicles, things like that, living the life of a lifestyle, a rock star, whatever you want to call it. But for yourself, it's giving you that moment. You speak about meditation. How do you shut off that lens between the professional versus the day-to-day life that we have to go through in ebbs and flows?
I think there are many ways to look at this. I tend to integrate them. For me, not having strong lines between what I do professionally and what I do personally. And I don't think it's a lack of boundaries. What I think is that I hold the same values and hold myself to the same standards of relationship within and outside of my professional life. So as I talk to you, I'm having this professional conversation, but I'm also having a personal conversation to you, Rory, and we're having this connection and we are opening ourselves up to this experience. And what meditation, for example, helps me do is, again, to stay present to whatever arises. And for me, and I understand that sometimes we do have to, kind of like that new show Severance that's been out this year, like, people severed the parts of their life. And I did that in the cult. I came from somewhere, and then when I left, I severed that, and I didn't think about it again. Well, I thought about it, but I did not publicly speak of it. I didn't acknowledge it, even to new people that I met who I let into my life to some degree. And that severing for me was very isolating and alienating. And so now I make it a choice and an intent and a commitment to integrate the parts of my life and to not hide from the things that I used to be ashamed of. Maybe there's still some shame there too, but like bringing them to the light helps me recognize that again, there are so many of us out here who are trying to reinvent ourselves because we are not happy with where we came from, or we're not happy. Sometimes it was our own choices and sometimes it was other people's choices, but like we don't want to stay where we were planted. We want to grow into something new. And for me, integrating those shameful parts of me has been the way that I have learned to show up. And apparently, it's honestly what people needed to hear, because before that, I was wearing a mask and I don't think that that was as effective.
Mm-hmm. You speak about wearing masks. Speaking to upbringing, right? Let's speak to that on the nervous system, right? The nervousness system and things like that. Take us down that road now, like the younger version you to where you're at now, and like the ebbs and flows. And are there any key trigger points that still do come up for you as well?
Great question, definitely. So when we think about the parasympathetic nervous system, the thing that sort of calms us down, I was raised in fight or flight all the time. I was raised to survive the apocalypse. I was raised to not sleep, like literally to be kind of like in army training. I mean, my dad actually was trained in the army. He was drafted. And he raised us to like wake up and like run at the just at the moment of waking, like not to ask questions, to obey. We literally did run every morning. We had to be timed. Our food was very restricted. There was just a lot of rules, and we were kept at hypervigilance. And I was raised that way. It was so normalized to me. I think it took me decades to understand that I was really good in crisis situations because it like calmed me down, because that's what I was trained for. And we had, at the college I taught at, we had a bomb threat one time, and there was like people dropping down from helicopters, and everyone was fine at the end of the day. They found it, but like it was, and I was so calm, in my class, I was just like, sit down, we're going to be fine. Like, we need to stay indoors. People are crying, screaming. And I'm like, all right, we got this. Let's tell a story, So I think that for me, the hypervigilance was really painful. And I didn't recognize that. I got sick. I had an autoimmune disease. I went to the hospital. I had so much pain physically in my body in my 20s. Like, even after I'd gotten out of there, I think about it now, and like, I feel so much, I don't know if younger is the right word, so much more comfortable in my body and so much more energetic than I did in the decade I was like repressing everything and trying to pretend it didn't exist. And so in a cult, what you do is you learn to obey somebody else and to push down anything that questions that. And if you it comes out, like, you get punished. There's different ways to discipline, but you are not allowed to voice feelings. And so I learned to repress that entirely. And that stayed with me. And I think that's still a trigger point when I get into situations that I feel are conflict. My first reaction is just to completely shut down, and say like, that nobody wants to hear what I have to say. It's like, just don't talk, listen, don't talk. And having to reimagine that there can be a conversation between, for example, people who disagree. And that is something on Joe Rogan that I did respect, and I do respect about what he does, is that he is willing to bring people on who he might not agree with, but also his audience might not agree with, and to have conversations where there's some room for different points of view. And that took me, I feel like, my whole adult life to sit with that discomfort.
True. And I think that's what we're speaking to there, is a contrarian. You got to have a contrarian way of when you're doing this, especially when mics are on, right? And we have recordings going on, because anyone can watch that podcast or this podcast and take what they want to take and then stitch it up and have us sounding absolutely wild and crazy, because you can just start putting words in all over the place. But that's the reason why it's like, one of the things I do here for the last 8 years is be that contrarian when I have powerful conversations of this magnitude, because you can't go too far to the left and you can't go too far to the right. And you have to stand for something. And I stand for, let's overcome certain things to bring awareness to every man, every woman. And I'm just going to say it now, to every child, because the kids that are growing up, they learn from what we're putting out, the messages. I remember from charity boxing, a 14-year-old DM'd me, and I said to him, I said, look, can I repost this? And I reposted it back on my Instagram, because he said what he needed to say. And I'm like, I learned something that day from a 14-year-old. which basically put a whole other battery in my back. So what I say to is a lot of folks here is that no matter what you're going through, it's an experience, but it can also be somebody else's survival guide. And the thing is, in life, we don't know what other people experience. What that 14-year-old experience is not an experience I may have to go through. What your experience is, I'm not something I haven't gone through. I've had experiences that you haven't gone through. You know what I mean? So what it means is that we have to just know how to keep going. Just keep riding through the ties, taking the punches. Because if we don't take the punches and we just sit there and we're just like, okay, whatever, we just get hit and we just keep falling down, what is going to happen after that? What's going to happen? We don't want to get back up. We're going to have just a veil. We're going to be sheltered. We're going to be in the corner. And by the time you go, you're just like, where did my life go? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that skill that you're using in this metaphor of getting back up and learning how to get back up, that is the tool. And there's so many ways to find that, I think, in each of us. But the next time you get hit and you get pushed back down, you still have to figure out how to get back up again. Like every time it's hard. And yeah, you get better at it, but it's still a challenge. And that dance like with diversity, that dance with adversity that we brought up right at the beginning of this conversation is taking the punches, I think, and showing back up again anyway. And that is something I think in a cult, they don't want you to have the ability to get back up. They really do keep you down. But we all have a human spirit, a fire inside of us, and that can be relit. Like someone can douse it, and you could be through things that are worse than I've been through. Like people have been through so many things that doused everything they had in them, and they can still find a way to relight that fire. And
Absolutely.
That's just such an inspirational thing to see.
Talk about inspirational. When was that moment of truth for you to walk out, to get out of that cult?
For me, I think it was a long process, and the book does go through. And one of the things that I've been hearing from young people, a lot of young men too, who, especially immigrants or people who come from a lot of really strong expectations, they're like, you really captured how you think you're about to get out, and then you're caught back in, and it's a cycle, and it just keeps going around. And so it's not, for me, it wasn't one moment. I mean, I can, I guess, point to a really early childhood memory of my grandfather kicking my brother in the head, which is in the book, and that being so normalized that nobody stood up for this 3-year-old boy and the reason he kicked him in the head is because he was falling asleep during the sermon. And you're not allowed to even at age 3. And I feel like my brother had hearing damage from that. He's had a lot of other things, but even as a 7-year-old, my desire to protect him and then people not letting me protect him made me angry at my grandfather, but I wasn't allowed to express that anger. But I felt it so strongly that it started making me think, is this okay? And everybody in the world that I came from thought that was okay. Like nobody stood up for that and said, we don't kick little boys. It's like that was just what people do. And so those were the seeds that were planted over a period of time where I kept seeing violence. I kept seeing people being really picking on underdogs. Boys getting beat up. It was primarily a masculine organization. We had a lot more men in the organization than women. I say organization because that's what they called it, but cult we could call it too. And the only people who could be in the cult are people who got there as little kids. Like that's how you got in there. And people would leave their families as young children and be raised in this environment, and they would have things beat out of them. And then by the time I was 15, I was just so horrified by that. And I started writing letters. Well, I started receiving letters, then writing letters to a boy who was an older teenager who was in the group. And that kind of opened my eyes to seeing his perspective. And his father had committed suicide. And there was just a lot of trauma that I had never talked about. And learning to talk about that in secret with a boy helped me kind of perceive that what we were experiencing was not right and that we would have to find a way out. And my way out was long and drawn out, which is what the whole book's about. But when I got out, I also was very scared. It wasn't like triumphant, like, yay. It was like, oh my goodness, what did I just get myself into? And I think that's like entrepreneurial. Like if you leave your job, I mean, most of us take time before we leave, but even at the point where you feel like you're almost ready and you feel like you need to make the jump, when you make the jump, it's really scary. And I think that if we try to wait till we're ready, we'll never do anything. Like I was not ready to leave a cult. I was not ready to leave my career. But I knew that I had the tools to manage what would happen if I did. And I think we just have to choose ourselves and take a risk on ourselves and believe that if we are doing the work that we feel called to do, and we're like speaking from our own heart center, that we will be held, that there will be an audience or there will be people who will meet us there. And I think that's ultimately when I decided to leave, I believe there'll be someone on the other side, and I don't know. I can't see this person. I can't see these people, but they are out there, and I have to just take that leap of faith.
Absolutely. I love how you tied in the leaving the 9 to 5 with that, because that right there for me is like it was like, whoa, a ha moment, because I never would have thought of it that way. You know what I mean? And that's the thing about powerful storytelling, right? It's how little things that we go through ties it all the way back to our real life. You know what I mean? And I always hear my mentor, Eric Thomas, always would say is real life scenarios expose fake people, right? Dr. Eric Thomas said that, E.T. the hip hop preacher. And I go back to it now because it's someone that's been enlisted in me back over, now we're going about 13, 14 years. Because I was going through my development, health and fitness, things like that. A lot of overcoming adversity that led to that too. And for me, when I heard him say that, I was like, huh. But now that I'm older, I never understood what it truly meant. So when it's like when life hits you, Rocky said it the most, when life hits you in the face, you're either going to do one of two things. You're either going to shrivel up or you pick yourself back up and you get up. It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Let's speak to the relationship aspect, because that's very important, especially when it comes to these podcasts. I'm always about relationships, friendships, business relationships, the kiss in the mouth relationships. How has it being in that cult affected like your personal, like love life, relationships and things like that? If you can speak to that for the audience.
Well, when I was growing up, we were not allowed to have any relationships. We had what they called unity, like there was group relationship, but you couldn't partner off within that. Like you obviously you couldn't have romantic relationships, but you also couldn't have a friendship. Like you couldn't be one-on-one with somebody. You would have to be in a group of 3 or more. I think they were very big on not. I think they said that they didn't want to create cliques or they wanted everyone to be the same. But I was raised really to be taught that there was nothing unique about me and that I should not in any way look for something in somebody else that only God could provide. And what they meant, I think, by God was the leaders in charge of telling us what God was. So I'm not talking about the personal God that you might like believe in, but like the way God was presented in this world. And so I was raised to really not trust or have faith in anything. Our mom didn't raise us. She just kind of pushed us off the collective before we were a week old. There wasn't bonding. So when I got out, it was really difficult I moved into a co-ed dormitory and I was like really scared of all the young men because I've been raised with a lot of men, but I hadn't been raised with outsiders, and I hadn't dated. I hadn't had any experience with, what was really normalized in college culture. I had never drank, and I didn't drink in college at all, actually. I didn't trust that I could risk losing my mind because I felt like I needed to be in control. So I think that relationships were really difficult. I did get married really young, but I married a man in the cult who was older than me, and he left because he saw what happened to me. And so I got married, had children really young. I feel like by raising my kids, I kind of re-raised myself. And I stayed married for a really long time, and I felt that at the time, I felt like it just kept me from having to deal with any other relationships. But what I eventually learned to do, and I think this was the real opening point for me, is I learned to make deep female friendships, like non-sexual friendships, non-physical friendships, but also learn to save space for hugs, for And I started going to yoga eventually, and a lot of women are very, I guess you would say supportive in that environment, but they're very physical in this safe environment. Like they can do adjustments on your body, and I started to experience what it felt like to be held in safe spaces. And I had a rape event that I'm not going to go into that's after the book, and not after the book came out, but after the period I wrote about in the book. And I had to kind of really reintegrate what safe touch could possibly be. And I met a man who wanted to spend a lot of time with me, but he didn't need to push sex onto me when I felt unsafe. And I think that was the biggest gift. And I don't think he was just doing me a favor. I think he really appreciated building a relationship first. And I just needed someone to hold me who wasn't asking me to go further than I was capable of willingly at that point. And that built trust in me. And that just took a really long time for me to recognize that there are men who want a safe space for themselves and will provide it for you, and that they're not secretly coming with another agenda. That of course we all want to be loved in all the ways we want to be loved, but that some of us can find the patience to get there. So I do feel that I'm in a good relationship right now. I'm fairly private about my relationship right now because I feel like he didn't choose to be in the public, but and he doesn't want to be named, but I feel like it's been a long journey getting there, and I still get really scared. I get, really scared when anyone gets too close to me, and it feels sometimes like I have to protect myself, and I just keep doing the work. I have to keep providing a safe space for myself and realize a lot of that is internal. Like, it's not because someone on the outside is trying to hurt me or my person is trying to hurt me. It's like, oh wait, I'm scared because of the things that happened to me. And when someone's touching on that, then I'm like, okay. So anyway, what I do is I meditate, or I actually, if I want to be around other people, I go to a yoga class. I also teach yoga, but I go to one and I just am around other humans men and women, who are there to take care of themselves. And then I can go back to my relationship and be ready to have the conversation and say, all right, I'm here for it. Yeah. Instead of
we heard some sirens in the background, things like that. Doesn't take away from the conversation. It's because you were cooking with that heat. And I feel like the smoke detectors came off and stuff like that. Just to add a little bit of humor, because what you spoke to is so bloody important. That level of safety that the masculine energy has to provide. And I say this a lot, and I think some men may hear me. I think some women may hear me. And they're like, oh, he's just kind of maybe speaking. But when you have that person that is emotionally regulated, they are not going to push physicality necessarily on you, because for them, it's about making it feel safe. The average height of a woman is what? 5 foot, 5'6", 5'7"?
The average is 5'4", actually.
5'4". Okay, let's go 5'4", right?
We're little.
When you're a guy, like I say, I'll speak to my nature. You're 6'4", you got an athletic build. It's this and that. We're broly looking men. So you got to think, women will see all different men from all different shapes and sizes. The average man is going to be taller and a little bit more built structure than a woman. Mm-hmm. So when you speak to that ability of that person at that time to make you feel safe, it's the importance. Because the thing is, a lot of women and a lot of men go through situations in life that it's the littlest yell, tone, maybe physical gesture that you make, and it can completely offset everything. And then you're wondering, well, wait, why is she like this, or why he's like that? That's why I kind of stopped the whole play fighting thing. Like, tickling, play fight, because you don't know what somebody's, you don't know. Because some folks react to things differently. So it's like making that door open where it's wide open, that person, or that man, that woman can come to you. Feel safe in that moment, because I think that you don't know what somebody's gone through. Right? That's the whole commonality of this conversation. And it's like men and women all have to do better. Right? Find that inner seeking coach or meditation or that spiritual retreat and realign some of them chakras. because you can't just be, yo, I see this girl, I got to be physical with her. It doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't. So it's like, men, do better. Show up. Provision that leadership, provision that peace, that safety for her to be able to open up and blossom. You can chime in if you want to.
I was thinking about the whole chakra thing and like this idea of that there are these seven energies and that all of us will experience blocks in these various energies. And when we do the work on our own bodies, like we are finding it. And I think that, for some people, especially men, there's a lot of physical training that helps them like clear the space to have an emotional relationship. And that's a beautiful way to do it. I work with a lot of men in yoga who are athletes and in their 40s, all of a sudden they find that, they're like rigid in all sorts of places in their body. And they come with a desire for a heart opening and for like just more flexibility in their lives. And I think that we each have our own journeys, but all of us have to find practices that open the energy fields. And wherever we're stuck, we need to listen to those who love us, who can point out sometimes things that we can't see and open up those channels. And then when we meet a person that we are willing to be intimate with, we're coming from a place of openness ourselves, because you can ask someone else to be open with you, but if you don't have that space, then there's no room for that energetic dance. And I think that is something it took me a long time to understand, is when I got defensive, that wasn't helping anyone else feel that this was a safe space. And so I had to find a way to, again, feel safe and yes, to trust another person to hold that space. But if I wasn't willing to accept that safety, then we weren't going to move forward. And that was work I had to do even outside of the relationship to keep bringing back to the relationship.
And you'll know when someone is perpetrating a fraud when they're talking about that safety aspect, because they're not going to show up within their own life and you can see it, right? And that's the thing, is where it's like you save that space, you hold that space, you hold that container. And I'm just like, hey, it's like, let's empty the tank together. Let's figure things out. I'm always the type of person, I compartmentalize a lot of stuff. I'm not to mock anybody that's been through any trauma or experience and things like that. I've been starting to speak about this a lot on the podcast. My traumatic experiences was water and almost drowning when I was a child. That's about it, right? There's a couple other things, but I can overcome that. But what I'm trying to say is, it could be Michelle's story. It could be something else, down like that people have grown up when they don't have no mom, no dad. There was their uncle that raised them. That's a traumatic experience, because it's like, you don't know your mom, you don't know your dad. So it's like, how do you navigate that? And then there's some folks that bring that into relationships where they may be dating you and they see the relationship that you have with your mom and dad, and now it's different because they're like, well, I never had that. How do I experience that? So when they see that love, when they see that protection from that family, it's kind of like they're like shielding away from it. Because I've seen that happen. I've had the conversations. I've had the, not necessarily podcast conversation where that happens. So it's like understanding what your heart and what your mind and your body and soul can be open to. Because life comes at you really, really fast, ladies and gentlemen. It does.
Roy, how are you with water now?
I love that you say that, because this is the whole accountability piece for 2025. So over here in Toronto, the weather is starting to get warmer, right? It's not negative temperatures. Hopefully we're out the clear, but Canada is weird. I said I was going to do a Toronto Island boat thingamajig. I don't know if I'm ever going to get in water, but that's a large enough body of water. I believe if I'm on a boat, not a cruise, ladies and gentlemen, a boat, I should be able to go. I don't know if I'm going to get to the cruise part, because that's way too much going on. Okay. Like, I'll probably be like, not happening. I'm not going in water. I'm not saying that I can't go to a pool and put my feet in, but it's probably going to be the shallow end. It's just how it is. Don't tell me to go to the deep end. Don't tell me you're going to hold my hand. No, I'm good. I do the boat thing, and we'll see how that goes. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But I'm not promising people I'm deep sea diving in a shark tank with sharks around me. No, not happening. As much as I like Shark Week. You know what I mean? But other than that, ain't happening. You know what I mean? It ain't happening.
but you can articulate that. And so you can say to someone, this is how far I'm willing to go. I'll put my feet in this pool and this is what I can do. And this is where I am on my journey. And I'm not just going to walk away from the pool. I'll sit there on the side and I'll watch you or whatever. And I think that is like, it's literal in your case, the water. But I think that whatever it is that we have been traumatized by, we sometimes have to be on the periphery for a long time. And you don't know, maybe someday you'll want to get in. You don't know. But somebody pushing you is not going to be the way that you're going to feel safe. It's going to be when and if that if you want to do that. And I think that, the getting back up again sometimes really just means showing up around the pool, instead of just running the opposite direction. So good for you. And I hope that you
Thank
get on
you.
the boat. You'll have to let me know if that works out.
Oh, I listen, I'm already planning on posting something about it,
Okay.
when it happens and things like that. Maybe stitch up a nice reel, and all that good stuff. I have some folks that I'm gonna challenge to come with me on that, just to make sure, hey, this is what I'm doing. Let's hold me accountable. You're there, and I think they'll be able to walk me through. Not maybe they won't not hold my hand, but they'll be able to be like, okay, you'll be fine. Because I know it's gonna be nerve wracking, just getting up on the dot before it goes out, and you're just like,
Of course.
take a deep breath. But this is
I'm
how
feeling
life
it
is,
right now. I'm totally.
right?
You know,
So
you're talking about safe people like that you have that you trust in your life, and something that I do myself, and I've and taught people in group settings to also do, is when you know what practices work for you, whatever healing practices. So I've had students make lists, their toolkits for self care, because when we most need it, sometimes we forget what we need, but like they've created it themselves. But to share it with another person, so that when I have a friend, for example, who's calling up and so stressed out as whatever is going off on something, I can say, hey, have you gone to a yoga class in the last week? Do you have time to make time for that tonight? And I can offer something that they have already told me in the past is useful to them, right? And so and sometimes even something little, like, can you get a glass of water right now? When's the last time you drank? Are you dehydrated? Like, it's not to just calm them down, because they have the right to be upset, but sometimes we forget our practices, and other people recognizing what we need and reminding us of that can be so good for us. And it's so vulnerable to give someone sort of that permission to remind you of your intentions and like your commitments.
for sure, let me ask you this question. What do you feel is one question people are too afraid to ask you, but you wish they would?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, since I've been talking about this book, I feel like there are many people who interview me or in audiences who just like readers who ask things, who ask very, very, very bold questions. So I would say I can't think of anything that I'm aware of that anyone's ever shied away from. I mean, I've been asked questions that I think like, wow, that was really, but I also want you to know, and anyone, that you can ask me anything. And if I don't feel I can answer for some reason, I'll let you know. But I think people have, especially I've got a lot of people who have written me on DMs, or they found an email, or, well, you can find an email on my website. But I've gotten hundreds of letters from people who tell part of their story and ask me really hard questions. And if I feel that it's approached from, if I feel like they've been respectful in the way that they've asked the question, I will answer. I will respond and say, thank you for your vulnerability in this, and here is what happened. And if they decide to misuse that, there's nothing I can do about it. But if I feel that it's in good faith, I will answer. So I don't know if this is a question that people are scared to ask, but I think that one thing I get asked, that I think is a hard question to answer, is how do you leave behind something that is in your neural pathways? That's something that is so deeply integrated into your sense of self. And it's sort of like someone who leaves an abusive relationship and then finds himself in another abusive relationship, not because they want to be abused, but because they don't understand the patterns. I would say the thing that is really difficult is I have found myself in controlling situations, of course, after leaving a cult. And I think the thing that's really difficult is I no longer think that I can sever myself completely and say like, that was then, this is now. Instead, I, again, come back to the tools. And I always think to myself, this thing that you're being challenged with right now, it's kind of like a spiral, and it keeps coming around again. It keeps coming around again. And things like physical violence and abuse is something that I haven't always seen the red flags for, because it was so normalized. And so I've been in situations that I have been attacked and I've been hurt, and I think I have carried myself like a victim. And I had to learn, I mean, literally went to self-defense classes and really had to reprogram myself not to cower, but to stand back up again. And I think those neural pathways, one of the ways that I've been reprogramming them is through physical actions, like doing the thing that then helps reprogram the way you think. And I think that has
I love that you say that.
painful. Yeah.
I love that you say that, because safety is the most important thing. Because there's too many, like, it's getting crazy now out there. The day, like, I was just seeing on an Instagram video, like, the security guard in Toronto, in one of the major freaking malls, attacked this girl. When you're supposed to be there
Wow.
to be safety, not attacking a pedestrian. Heck, if she was shoplifting, I looked at the comments. People were like, she was shoplifting. But that doesn't mean that you haul off and you can't see it. But you heard her say, it's like, you put your hands on me. So let's put two and two together. You know what I mean? And things like that. And it was like one angle, but there's so many people that were walking in between. It was like a herd of people. And then she was on the other side. So it's like, you can tell if it was an edit or anything like that, because it didn't jump cut or anything. And I'm like, frick, man. It's like, you know, you got to protect yourself everywhere you go. You know, and I always say to folks is that sometimes wherever you're going, especially nighttime, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, travel in groups if you can. Travel in groups. You know what I mean? I know one of the biggest things when I worked in a store, retail, was you have a travel buddy. If somebody's driving or if someone is taking, you know, public transit, subway, whatever, but two people leave at the same time, or that person drives you to your vehicle or drives you to the bus stop or drives you to the subway station, or you know what I mean? Because it's like there's too many wackos out here that just wanting to test you. Mm-hmm. And because it's like the cool thing to do, because maybe they're going through something in life. And you got to just, sometimes you got to protect yourself at all costs, because we're living in a very strange world these days, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Not the small communities that humans were raised in for most of the millennia of human history. So yeah, we're living in very different worlds now. Yeah.
Let's get into this, because as we're winding it down, is if your story was never published, right? What part of your life would you still feel like it was a win?
What would still be a win? Is that what you asked me? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many wins. I'm so grateful. Here's a win. I have 4 children. They're now all adults, and none of them have participated in self-harm. They've never had legal conflicts, but they have never been in an abusive relationship. None of them. And they have never they've never, even when they were teenagers, came home crying over somebody who hurt them. They were able to choose people who loved them and who love them now, and all of them are in relationships. And for me, the idea that cycle has been broken, and that they could choose love for themselves and not choose people who are harming them, that just feels like a huge win, because you cannot control that as a parent. You can, like, you try to set them up for success, but like at the end of the day, they are going to make the choices they're going to make. And it's just such a relief when you see them making healthy choices for themselves. So that's a huge win. I have committed my life as a teacher. I've been a teacher of writing, and I think it's a huge win that I still hear from students I taught 20 years ago. Someone who called me up who's doing a podcast that he had been my student over 20 years ago, and he could remember what he learned. And he was able to talk about the way that it changed his life and helped him at the time. As a young man, he felt very lost, and he felt he came in this environment where someone encouraged him. And so I think those kinds of wins, that the life path that I've chosen is not just right now, that I chose it a long time ago, that I have helped people tell their stories. And so even if I had never told mine publicly, I know for sure I have helped thousands of young people find a story inside of them and learn to articulate it. And like I said, I worked with incarcerated people, and I feel like just giving them a space and holding space for them to tell their stories. Most of them come from just extremely challenging backgrounds. And so I think it's a huge win to be holding so many other people's stories.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to go back to that question I asked about the question that nobody has ever asked, because I do my research, ladies and gentlemen. So she's always has the bookshelf behind her. This is real time. We're going to be doing this. I see all those books. Have you read all those books?
Yeah.
See? Bang. I knew it. I knew it. Out of all those books, which one stands out the most to you?
Well, this is not even close to all the books that I own or have read, but so I don't know if the most important ones are behind me. I have a lot of nature books here that I've been playing with. But I would say that probably the most significant book, and especially when I read Beloved by Toni Morrison. And Toni Morrison came to my college, and she was speaking, and I was in a class my senior year where the teacher said she was going to invite one student to come to lunch with her with Toni Morrison. And I got invited to do that. So I got to have lunch with Toni Morrison before she was already huge, but when she was still, I guess, going to colleges. And I sat with her and I said, what is the one thing that I don't know that you think a young woman should know? What is the one thing that maybe you would wish you had known? And she said, you're not in a rush. Live a life before you get obsessed with the story that you need to tell. You have to live a story before you have one to share. And when I read Beloved, which was during that time, I felt so much that for someone to come out of trauma, and that the story that Seth has where she's, just done this thing she's ashamed of with her children, and she's left slavery, and she's just done all these things that are so difficult, that she's not past it, and that she has to learn to accept love and to give love, but to receive it. And I think that thinking about learning to receive love when I was a young woman, knowing that I wasn't able to do that yet, to have Toni Morrison be the one who said, it's not too late. You're going to find it. Not just love, but you're going to find a story that's going to make sense to you later, but don't be in a rush. Just live it first and then worry about telling it. And I'm just so grateful that I got the chance to read it and then also hear it from the woman who said that so eloquently.
I love that. I love that. Before we get out of here, though, we're going to talk about green. Because you're in green today. We were talking about that with branding, and I was like, you know what? She's going to do the green. She said she's going to change, do all of her thing. What's the whole concept behind the green?
All right, so green is the color of growth. Plants and the things that I was looking at as tools in Forager, in the book, looking at plants being a source of healing and a source of nourishment. And since I've been teaching through the chakras, which we just mentioned a while ago, the fourth chakra, which is our heart chakra, the color of the chakra is green. It's not what people might think of as, the heart must be red, but the heart chakra's color is green. And so for me, uniting the idea of the energy field of our heart, which is our love for more than just our romantic partners, right? It's our love for humankind. It's our ability to extend our emotional space to others. To think about that in relation to the way that plants grow and the nourishment that we need as our own form of plant, but that the nourishment we need from our heart is to share our stories with other people. And so the color green reminds me to come back to my heart and to always think of every experience where I'm connecting to another person, another human, as an opportunity for growth in the exchange of our energies.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Michelle, I appreciate everything you stand for. And first and foremost, I'm going to say this. I'm a big supporter of the creator when it comes down to their book, right? So for me, audiobook is my way to go. I'm going to get you to plug all that information where folks can check out the book. I know I'm going to get it on Audible. You know what I mean? I'm actually going to buy it on Audible. Because here's the thing about that. And I want to speak to a lot of folks when it comes down to supporting the creator. Paying that subscription price is all good and dandy, and you can just ebbs and flows and recycle it, but pay for the book. Heck, even buy the paperback, buy the hardcover. When you purchase the book, it goes back to the creator, and that's the most important thing. But go ahead, plug all your information for us and where we can check you out.
Well, thank you and I do support creators too. I pre-order people's books. I do all of that and try to celebrate people telling their stories. You can also listen to my book on Spotify, and I do actually get something from that. If you listen to at least half the book, you got to listen to at least half of it for me to get any credit at all. But I also do a Substack, and I want to just mention, and I'll give Rory the link so you'll have that when you're hearing this. And that is a conversation I have every single week. I post every Friday. I give people foraging tips and how to find what they need in their own lives. And that has been a way to continue to talk to thousands of people and to like have a relationship. And I honestly read every single comment and I reply to people. So you can buy the book anywhere books are sold. I'm pleased to say it's still hanging out in bookstores, but you can buy it online. And I would love to hear from you. So if you go to my Substack, you can write me directly. And I would love to hear your story and think about the way that my story perhaps overlaps with yours in some way that's meaningful.
Beautiful, beautiful, well said. I felt every bit of that, honestly, because I feel like we're doing some courageous work, folks. And it's not about us, really. It's not. It's about y'all. It doesn't matter how many subscribers you have, how many listens you have. It's about bringing conversations to a full force for y'all to just really grip, take with, and share it to the rest of the world. Share it to that friend, that coworker, right? That neighbor, you know? It doesn't take anything to just take a link and just send it to them. Like, hey, listen to this. This could change your life. You know what? Go to the link in the bio, get that book, get that podcast, and do all that good stuff. So, Michelle, keep doing your thing. I'm a big supporter, and I truly believe this is just the first part of it for you. I think there's so many things in the works for you. Just keep on going and keep striving for great things, okay?
I appreciate you, Rory. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your wisdom.